The icy wind whipped across the lake, carrying with it the sound of cracking ice, sharp, terrifying, and final. A man's breath hung heavy in the cold air, each exhale fogging as he sprinted toward the sound of faint cries. His boots slipped against the frozen surface, but his heart was stronger than fear. He had no time to think, no time to calculate the risks. A life was on the line. That man was Daniel, a struggling single father who had already lost too much in life, but today, fate was about to test him in a way he never imagined. And what happened next would change his life forever. Daniel wasn't supposed to be near the lake that evening. He had just finished a long shift at the mechanic shop, his hands greasy, his back aching, and his pockets nearly empty. The holidays were around the corner, and his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had written a Christmas list that was painfully short. "Dad, I just want mittens that don't have holes." That one sentence broke Daniel's heart. But instead of going home directly, he cut across the frozen lake as a shortcut to save time. That's when he heard it, the desperate scream for help. On the ice, a young woman was flailing, the freezing water already pulling her down. The surface had cracked beneath her weight, and she was clawing to stay above. Without hesitation, Daniel dropped his worn-out bag and raced to her. "Hold on. Don't let go," he shouted, his voice echoing into the emptiness of the frozen night. He stretched his body flat on the ice, crawling inch by inch until he could grab her wrist. The cold water bit into his skin as he pulled with all his strength. His muscles trembled, his knuckles scraped against jagged ice, but finally, with one last heave, he dragged her out. The woman collapsed against him, coughing violently, her long hair dripping with icy water. She was trembling, her lips blue, but her eyes held a fire, as though she wasn't someone who gave up easily. Daniel quickly wrapped his old jacket around her and half-carried, half-dragged her to the edge of the lake. His own body was numb, his clothes damp from the icy spray, but his focus never wavered. "You're safe now. You're okay," he whispered, though his voice shook from exhaustion. What Daniel didn't know was that the woman he had just rescued was no ordinary stranger. Her name was Isabella Whitmore, the only daughter of one of the wealthiest business magnates in the country. But Isabella wasn't the type to flaunt her identity. She had been walking alone by the lake to escape the suffocating world of private jets, luxury parties, and people who only saw her last name, not her. Yet in that moment, shivering in Daniel's jacket, she wasn't a billionaire heiress. She was just a terrified young woman whose life had been saved by a man who owned almost nothing but his courage. Daniel brought her to his small apartment nearby. The place was modest, barely 2 rooms, the walls chipped, the heater struggling to fight off the winter chill. Lily peeked from her bedroom, her big brown eyes widening at the sight of a soaked stranger in their home. "Daddy, who is she?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled tiredly, brushing his daughter's hair back. "She's someone who needed our help, sweetheart." Isabella looked around the humble home, struck by its warmth despite its poverty. Lily offered her a blanket, one with faded cartoon characters, and Isabella accepted it with a trembling smile. For the first time in a long while, Isabella felt seen, not as an heiress, but as a human being. Over the next few days, Isabella returned to thank Daniel. He had refused any reward, simply saying, anyone would have done the same. But Isabella knew better. Most people wouldn't have risked their own life on the cracking ice. She watched as Daniel worked long hours, juggling 2 jobs while still making time for Lily, helping her with homework, cooking simple meals, and telling her bedtime stories. Despite his exhaustion, he never once complained. Isabella, who had grown up surrounded by wealth but starved of genuine affection, found herself drawn to this father and daughter. Slowly, their lives began to intertwine. Isabella would visit, bringing groceries, by accident, or offering to walk Lily home from school. Lily adored her instantly, telling Daniel one night, "Daddy, she laughs like sunshine." Daniel chuckled but secretly felt something stir in his chest. Isabella's presence was like a light in their tiny apartment, filling it with warmth it hadn't known for years. But not everyone welcomed the bond. Daniel's co-workers teased him, saying she was out of his league. When Isabella's family discovered where she had been spending her time, they were furious. "He's just a mechanic," her father raged. "He'll never belong in our world." Isabella stood her ground, her voice firm for the first time in years. "He may not have money, but he has something no billionaire can buy: integrity and love." The real turning point came one snowy evening when Lily fell sick. Daniel panicked, worried he couldn't afford the hospital bills. Isabella rushed in, taking charge, calling the best doctors she knew. But instead of just paying for everything, she knelt beside Daniel and whispered, "You've given me something far greater than money. You gave me family when I had none. Let me be here for you." It was in that moment Daniel finally saw her not as a stranger he rescued, not as an heiress, but as someone who genuinely cared.